What is ETL? In today's video, we're going to be covering ETL, Extract, Transform, Load. We're going to have a look into what it is, how it's used, and some of the common architectures around it. So you've probably heard of ETL 1,000 times. Anything in software, data, ETL is always being mentioned. But what is it? So ETL is a three-step process, the first being extract, the second being transform, and the third being load. And these are the three steps of how data is passed through a pipeline. Extract. So the first step is to collect data from a source system. So this source system can be anything, and it's usually a whirlwind of different systems. So you can have files, you can have a database, you could even have an API, and more often than not, it's usually sitting in the cloud. So let's take a typical form of data, which is a file. And in this case, say we've got a CSV file. Now with extraction, you usually have two forms, that's batch and streaming processes. And with CSV files, because it's semi-structured or structured, normally it's easier just reading them in. Transform. So raw data is often messy at extraction, so it needs to be cleaned and prepared. But what does cleaned and prepared actually mean? So say you have a piece of data, and around it you notice that there is a malformed and also missing data. So this actually needs to be fixed. So what we need to do is fill in that missing data and then fix that malformed piece of data. Say you have tabular data, and then you notice that there's actually duplicate records. So you notice there's two Sarah in the table. Well, we need to deduplicate that. Another type of transformations are joins, when we join different data sets together. The goal of joining the data is to combine them and to output something new. This data can then be used downstream for other purposes. Common forms of cleaning and transformations can be dropping duplicates from records. It could also be renaming certain fields and columns. And as mentioned before, you might be joining or merging different data sets together. Load. So the last step in an ETL pipeline is to load the data. So the data is clean, and now we just need to load it into the final destination. So what does load actually entail? So say you have your piece of data and we put it in a box. Now that box needs to be shipped off to somewhere where we can store it. And quite often it is stored in a database. Now once it is stored, it can then be used downstream for analytics, or it can be used for reporting, powering dashboards and creating reports. So when we think about ETL, we can break it down into a simple workflow. You get the file, you clean it, and then you load it into a database. Now let's expand on that simple ETL diagram and actually apply a real life example. So here we have various data sources. You have the Shopify orders, Stripe payments, and also product CSV files. Then we process that through the ETL pipeline. And once that's done, then we can finally load that into a data warehouse. Once it's in the data warehouse, then we can use that to drive and power analytics and reporting like Power BI dashboards. But then you also have ELT. This is when you switch the load and the transform around. So now you have the file, you load it into the database first, and then you clean and transform it afterwards. So you have ETL, and then you also have ELT. Why do we have two, you may ask? Well, in modern times, it's actually more common for people to use ELT. As technology grows and our demand for our data grows, people have shifted towards loading first and then transforming after. Traditional data pipelines were built on the ETL workflow. These were for data volumes that are smaller, with simpler transformations, and you might want to minimize storage. And these all lead to much simpler pipelines with less requirements in terms of demand and technology. But in modern times, we have shifted towards the ELT process. And that's because we've developed our cloud data warehouses where we can process large data sets, support multiple teams and organizations, and built an enterprise scale platform. So there are dozens of apps, vendors, and SaaS products that already implement ETL and ELT pipelines for you. These include Informatica, Airbyte, Matillion, and Fivetran. So now it's time for a quiz. First question, what does transform step do that raw extract does not? A, it copies raw files into another folder. B, cleans and deduplicates the data. C, joins different sets of data if available. And D, enforces a specific data schema. Yes, so there's actually 3 answers. If you remember, transform is a step where we clean, process the data so that we prepare it for loading. In this case, we need to make sure we clean and deduplicate the data, join different sets of data together so that we get new outputs, and make sure we enforce a schema that we expect. So I hope you have a better understanding of what ETL pipelines are. It's essentially a data integration approach that's used in traditional pipelines where you take raw data, you transform it, and then you load it into a database. We also looked into ELT, which is a more modern version of the ETL pipeline and is more commonly used in today's infrastructures. If you would like a video on how you can actually build a data pipeline, then make sure you leave a like and a comment down below, and make sure to subscribe for more content.